Alright, so before we get into the meat and potatoes of this video, we got a little cleanup from yesterday. I reported on Stacey Abrams' very crooked, very partisan sister, who's a judge in Georgia. Weird how that stuff always tends to work out. She made a very terrible ruling about the voter rolls and not being allowed to clean them up because people who file a change of address might have a change of heart at the same time and still need to vote in their same county. Well, that's just not the case anymore because as of today, Georgia judge rolls back order that blocked counties from voter roll cleanup. Well, it wasn't another judge that stepped in. It was actually Abrams. Weird, or whatever, Gardner. It's just tough to believe anybody would marry the shoe-polished Michelin man. Federal judge who on Monday blocked 2 Georgia counties from removing voter from voter rolls, eased her order just before midnight Wednesday. District Court Judge Leslie Abrams Gardner, an Obama appointee and sister of Stacey Abrams, need to point that out too, that's very important, ruled that Ben Hill County still cannot remove any voters from the voter rolls, but said Muscogee County Board of Elections and Registrations can remove voter rolls if they do not rely solely on the United States Postal Service's National Change of Address System. So only one county. What makes the other county special? They were ruled on for the exact same reasons. I'm sure she has some kind of stupid logic behind this one. Probably not. The board must allow voters whose eligibility has been changed to cast a provisional ballot in the January 5th, 2021 runoff elections. They also must advise the voter of specific evidence of ineligibility by phone and by writing by January 6th. And advise the voters of their rights to be heard at present evidence in response to those findings. The new order dissolved Gardner's earlier temporary restraining order. It came after the court held a hearing Wednesday. Ben Hill County Board of Election members and Supervisor Cindy Dunlop has filed a motion arguing that there is no evidence the county's actions were taken in bad faith or with partisan interest. County officials noted that any elector or voter may challenge the right of another elector under state law, and that the challenge meets procedural requirements. The board must immediately consider such challenge and determine whether probable cause exists and sustain such challenge. Yeah, so they went in on this fucking reversal of ruling, and it kind of makes 100% sense because doing it for one county when 2 counties were on this board for the exact same reasons, or they were a part of the lawsuit for the exact same reasons, doesn't make any sense. I also just checked the population of both Muscogee and Ben Hill County. Ben Hill County has about 16,700 people living in it. Didn't say how many people were eligible to vote. And then there are about 67,000 people in Muscogee County. So at least the larger county got the ability to clean up their voter rolls, which should have been done beforehand anyways. Fucking lazy election officials. You trust them to certify a presidential election, but you can't trust them to actually do their job on time. Fucking stupid people. But yeah, now that that's cleaned up, I guess we're gonna have to see if Ben Hill County is gonna get the same kind of relief that Muscogee County did. But until then, this case is kind of just off the books. Probably it might get cleaned up before Tuesday's vote, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that. Because, goddammit, these people have to party. They're the ones probably telling you to stay at home and be in fear for this New Year's Eve, but they'll be out partying, so don't worry about that. Rules for thee and not for me. Now, I referenced this lawsuit a couple of times as well, and kind of dismissed it as just being another one of these frivolous lawsuits, but it's important because it cleans up some of the holes that are in the Electoral Count Act of 1887. Okay? So as I noted when we covered the Electoral Count Act, there were a couple of different holes that were in it. More importantly, it's what happens if the 2 houses decide, the electors that were sent from a specific state are no longer eligible and we aren't going to count them. And let's just say nobody reaches 270. Okay, because keep throwing out electors because for the same reasons there's fraud or there's something unconstitutional, which shouldn't be too much of a stretch to figure out. What's going to happen if those states don't have legitimate electors? Well, what happens then is it goes to each state house and they vote by state delegation. And wouldn't you know it, every single one of those states that's contested right now and I just had to check this out, with the exception of Nevada and New Mexico, are Republican-controlled legislatures, and that's where the vote would go. Now, while New Mexico would be a bonus, and Nevada would definitely be nice, there's only 4 electoral votes in Nevada, and 5 in New Mexico. Okay, you should figure out if there's fraud there, but at the same time, that's not enough to really swing anything. It could be if a couple of the states get a little bit goofy, it could mean something. But in the grand scheme of things, it's always come down to Arizona, the Georgia, and then the Rust Belt states. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. So we're going to go over Louie Gohmert's lawsuit here, because it's, like I said, it's cleaning up those holes that were left in the Electoral Count Act, because it hasn't been relevant and hasn't been necessary since 1887 when it was put in. Okay, it could have been used in 1960 from a kind of an election that looked a lot too similar for my comfort to the 2020 election, but because Nixon was promised a couple of things a few years later, he wasn't exactly as cavalier as Trump is being right now. But we could potentially be seeing it in action here on January 7th, or 6th rather, and perhaps into January 7th, because this could be a long congressional session, to be completely honest. A federal judge's decision in a lawsuit filed against Vice President Mike Pence, this is alright that it's filed against him, by a fellow Republican, could substantially alter how the events unfold when Congress convenes for a joint session on January 6th to count the Electoral College votes, according to constitutional expert Rick Green. Well, the main thrust of the lawsuit filed by Representative Louie Gohmert from Texas is to clarify how much authority Pence will have over the counting of electoral votes. The case also seeks a court determination on how Congress should vote when Republicans object to slates of electors from 6 states where President Donald Trump has challenged the state certification election results. I don't think I'm losing my mind, but New Mexico makes 7 states, and they sent dueling electors as well, so meh. The lawsuit specifically challenges the constitutionality of the provision in the Electoral Count Act, which directs which Congress should vote on objections to slates of electors. And that's another thing that's not terribly clear. Okay, when they go out, both houses do their 2-hour debate amongst each other, and then what happens? Okay, they vote, let's say the Senate votes, and yeah, an entire story in and of itself. Let's say that, yeah, the Senate votes to object against the electors, but the House votes not to. Okay, what happens then? Okay, do both houses have to come to a consensus before anything happens with those electors? It's not clear. The act was very hastily put together, like I mentioned before, because, well, it was made in a time to avoid where the concession happened in 1887, so it wouldn't happen again, and now we're here. That's what happens when you do have a lazy people in Congress making a lot of decisions, and that's kind of the lax behavior that has led us to this point. Most people realize that if nobody gets to 270, or nobody gets to whatever the definition of a majority of the electors chosen turns out to be, then it goes to the House. But the House votes by state. Green, the founder of the Patriot Academy, told the Epoch Times, Louie Gohmert raises the issues in this lawsuit to say, if that's the only direction given by the Constitution on how the House would vote if in any of these scenarios, then they have to vote in a way that questions rejecting or accepting electors as well. And that's a big game changer. Yeah, exactly. What are we supposed to do? There's an act here. It doesn't tell us what to do. If there's no rule to enforce, how do you move forward? Are you just going to stay in this kind of purgatory situation where there's 2 presidents? I don't know. I don't know. Somehow I'm thinking Jeb is probably still going to win this one, you guys. Republicans hold a majority of state delegations in the House, which would mean they would have a majority of the House and Senate required to decide which slate of electors should be counted. Most people say, well, you know, the Democrat House is not going to reject the Pennsylvania Democrat electors, but the House has to vote by state. Absolutely, yes, they would reject those electors. And Pennsylvania's Senate and House has been incredibly vocal about wanting to see the evidence, okay? They were one of the states that held congressional hearings for the Trump campaign. Them, Arizona, and Arizona has been barking mad lately. And then also in Wisconsin as well. Or Michigan. It was Michigan, sorry. Wisconsin's just been on the mind lately. And they are all very, I believe Michigan's Senate is a little bit more 50-50, but it still has a Republican lean to it. And they would, with without a doubt 100% be voting for Trump if it gets to that point. But we don't know if it gets to that point. It's supposed to, but at the same time, people are supposed to be able to tell if there's anything funky going on with machines or checking signatures. That's what's supposed to happen. It doesn't necessarily happen. So even if the court only decides that one technical issue in the Gohmert suit and they will ignore all other issues, that could absolutely change the outcome of what happens on January 6th. And we have the lawsuit right here. And we're going to go through a couple of different points on it as well, so you guys know. It's a good summary by the Epoch Times, but we go to the source material around here. This civil action seeks an expedited declaratory judgment finding that the elector dispute resolution provision in Section 15 of the Electoral Count Act are unconstitutional because these provisions violate the Electors Clause in the 12th Amendment to the United States Constitution, Articles, Sections, Amendment number 12. Obviously, plaintiffs also request emergency injunctive relief required to effecate, it sounds dirty, the requested declaratory judgment. These provisions in the Section 15 of the Electoral Count Act are unconstitutional insofar as they establish procedures for determining which of two or more competing slates of presidential electors for a given state are to be counted in Electoral College, or how objections to be proffered slate are adjudicated. That violate the 12th Amendment. This violation occurs after the Electoral Count Act directs the defendant, Vice President Mike Pence, in his capacity as the President of the Senate and presiding officer over the January 6, 2021 joint session of Congress, to count the electoral votes for a state that has been appointed in violation of the Electors Clause, and 2. Limits or eliminates the exclusive authority and sole discretion under the 12th Amendment to determine which slates of electors for a state or neither may be counted, and 3. Replaces the 12th Amendment dispute resolution procedure under which the House of Representatives has sole authority to choose the president. That's what it's supposed to be. Each state is supposed to select their own electors according to their own state constitution. They can use whatever methods they want as long as it's in their constitution. As long as they adhere to their own rules, they could have a massive fucking coin flip if they wanted. They could flip it off the roof of the state legislature and fucking somebody call it in the air. Okay, cool. All 49 of California's electors get sent to Joe Biden. Cool, whatever. I wouldn't be surprised if California gets that desperate in the future, but it's legally within their own rules as long as their legislature passes it. All you'd have to do is just kind of earmark it onto another bill that would further decriminalize something corrupt and heinous. Sacrificing your neighbor's dog in the name of transgenderism or whatever, something fucking retarded. Alright, we're about halfway through this lawsuit here, and I was going to stop and take a look at what they are proposing to do here before we get to the conclusion. The Electoral Count Act of 1887, as subsequently amended, includes a number of provisions that are in direct conflict with the text of the Electors Clause in the 12th Amendment. Section 5 and 15 of the Electoral Count Act adopts an entirely different set of procedures for counting the electoral votes, for addressing situations where one candidate does not receive a majority, and for resolving disputes. Sections 16 and 18 of the Electoral Count Act provide additional procedural rules governing the joint session of Congress. The first part of Section 15 is consistent with the 12th Amendment insofar as that the President of the Senate shall be the presiding officer, and that all certificates and papers purporting to be a certificate of the electoral votes are to be opened by the President of the Senate. Cool. That is some very long-winded procedural nonsense. However, Section 15 diverges from the 12th Amendment by adopting procedures of the President of the Senate to call for objections, and if there are objections made in writing by one Senate or one member of the House, this shall trigger a dispute resolution procedure found nowhere in the 12th Amendment. Yes. That's why it seems so arbitrary. It's like, why would they only have a 2-hour debate amongst each other? Like, the Senate goes off to one side and the House goes off to another side, and they have to sit for 2 hours? That's where it gets funky. First, the Electoral Count Act submits disputes over the count of electoral votes in both the House of Representatives and to the Senate. The 12th Amendment envisages No such role for both houses of Congress. The President of the Senate and the President of the Senate alone shall count the electoral votes. This intent is borne out of the unanimous resolution attached to the final Constitution that described the procedures for electing the first president, stating in relevant part that the senators should appoint a president of the Senate for the sole purpose of receiving, opening, and counting the votes for president. For all subsequent elections, there would be a vice president to act as the president of the Senate. The Constitution vests that opening and counting in the vice president. Second, the Electoral Count Act gives both the House of Representatives and the Senate the power to vote or decide which of the two or more competing slates of electors shall be counted. And it requires the concurrence of both to count the electoral votes for one competing slates of electors. There we go. So that's what the Electoral Count Act says. But we also found out that that's not terribly constitutional at the moment. Under the 12th Amendment, the President of the Senate has sole authority to count votes in the first instance, and then the House may do so only in the event that no candidate receives a majority counted by the President of the Senate. There is no role for the Senate to participate in choosing the President. So according to the Electoral Count Act, everybody's involved. According to the Constitution, it requires the House and the Vice President, because the Vice President has been chosen to be the head of the Senate, therefore speak for the entire Senate. See how fucking slapdash this thing is? Kind of legislation that you would expect to be written during Nancy Pelosi's first term in the House. So why did they file this lawsuit? Why did Louie Gohmert file this lawsuit against Mike Pence? Well, he's trying to get him to enforce the Constitution. I know it's a weird thing in today's politics where you actually want to follow the rules, but there are some Republicans out there. It's a growing portion of it, according to the last couple of stories we're going to get to, but like the Epoch Times pointed out, and that expert that they had there as well, this is pretty important stuff. Accordingly, plaintiffs respectfully request that this court issue a judgment that declares the Section 15 of the Electoral Count Act as unconstitutional because it violates the 12th Amendment on its face, declares that Section 15 of the Electoral Count Act is unconstitutional because it violates the Electors Clause, declares that Vice President Pence, in his capacity as President of the Senate and presiding officer of the January 6, 2021 joint session of Congress, is subject solely to the requirements of the 12th Amendment and may exercise the exclusive authority and sole discretion in determining which electoral votes to count for a given state. Enjoins reliance on the provisions of the Electoral Count Act that would limit defendants' exclusive authority and the sole discretion to determine which two of or more competing slates of electors' votes are to be counted for president. Declare that, with respects to competing slates of electors from the states of Arizona and other contested states, with respect to objections to any single slate of electors, the 12th Amendment contains the exclusive dispute resolution mechanisms, namely that Vice President Mike Pence determines which slate of electors' votes shall be counted, or if none be counted for that state, and 2, if no person has a majority, then the House of Representatives, and only the House of Representatives, shall choose the president, where the votes in the House of Representatives shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having one vote, voting for the slate of electors that they would want. Declare that, also, with respect to competing slates of electors, so many states, slates, don't crucify me, with alternative dispute resolution procedures on priority rule in Section 3 of the United States Constitution, subsection 15, is null and void insofar as that it contradicts and replaces the 12th Amendment rules above with an entirely different procedure in which the House and Senate each separately decide which slate is to be counted, and even in the event of a disagreement, then only the votes for the electors whose appointment shall be certified by the executive of the state shall be counted. So there's a lot here, and as you can see, this is a 28-page document. We just touched on a handful of the pages here. It's pretty in-depth. I've said before that there's been a lot of lawsuits presented that we've gone over in the past month or two that look very good on paper, that look very important, and I definitely think that this one probably has some legs to it. If I was to put down a percentage that this actually gets ruled on by the January 6th, like 30%, I think, probably. It's being filed in the District Court of Texas. It could be a very supportive court, considering Texas was at the head of the very, very good lawsuit, very, very promising lawsuit that was summarily dismissed, or ignored by the Supreme Court. So we'll have to see where this goes, considering it's just asking for clarification and just doing a straight comparison as to constitutional and unconstitutional law at the federal level. Somebody's going to have to take a ruling on that. Will it come in time for the presidential election or for the state's electors to cast their votes and for them to be counted? It's tough to say. It's really tough to say. But in the event that there is the contestation, there's the 2-hour jousting period between the two houses, there is a growing amount of Republicans that are going to be contesting the vote. Okay, I was going to use a CNN article. It said up to 140 House Republicans are going to be contesting the vote. But then it was only from 2 anonymous GOP lawmaker sources, so I kind of backed away from that one. So we have a not entirely complete list of House members and senators who are pledging to object on January 6th. Like, there's a few more people that have hopped on the bandwagon. There's another House member in Florida, Madison Cawthorn, the 25-year-old from North Carolina. Another dude from Texas. Like, this list just keeps getting much longer and much more extensive, but no more senators have hopped on, at least at the time of recording. They're probably all planning their New Year's Eve parties or attending them right now, so maybe tomorrow, maybe over the weekend, I don't know. But here's the list we have so far. I could read them to you if you like, but all the people that you expect from the House are pretty much there. Mo Brooks, Matt Gaetz, Paul Gosar, Jeff Van Drew, which is hilarious because as late as 2019, I'm not too sure if it was into 2020 when he flipped, but that dude used to be a Democrat, but then he was like, that fucking party is bonkers ass crazy. And he got elected as a Republican in New Jersey. So it goes to show you that there are some moderates over there across the aisle, and Tulsi's one of them. But yeah, Madison Cawthorn is actually on this list, but the other dude from, he just got elected. He's a black dude from Florida. He's on that list as well. Lauren Boebert, Burgess Owens, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I've mentioned a whole host of time, but that is not an entirely complete list, but at the same time, it is growing at such a rapid rate that I can't fault anybody from not keeping it up to date because the declarations keep rolling in. And outside of a couple of Twitter posts with anonymous sources, and I'll just float these ideas out there, Mitch McConnell is livid that Josh Hawley has stepped up and said that he's going to contest the election. I don't know what he can possibly do other than just sit there and look like he needs to be hydrated or he's just missing his shell. Other than that, he's just going to have to sit there and take it and then potentially make Josh Hawley's life very difficult for the next, 2, 4, 6 years that he's still kicking around the Senate. The guy's 60, he wishes. 78 years old at this point, fuck's sakes. Term limits when? But this is how we're going to wrap this up. And this is probably going to be, unless there's something that breaks, this is probably going to be the final election video of 2020. I know I'm shedding a tear right now. You can probably see it because I got much better lighting now. 72% of Republicans see Trump as a model of the future of the GOP. As we kind of heard the rumors that like 140, 120 House members are going to contest the vote, that one senator right now and probably a whole bunch more are going to be coming forward. I think everybody kind of sees this. The only people who don't are in charge of the GOP, and that's a problem. Dude, I'm definitely on this side of the fence. There's no way that you can go back to business as usual after the past 4 years. Like it or not, if you remove all of the stuff that you don't like about Trump, and a lot of people just don't like the way he talks, don't like all the Twitter shenanigans. I get that. I totally understand that. But those are the same people that aren't listening to the entire video that I just put out, okay? It's long. I say fuck. I say retarded. I don't go out of my way to use them. They just, whatever comes to mind and feels good in the moment is what I say. And that's pretty much what Trump does. And that's what he's done for 4 years. That's what he's done for the past 40 years. But if you look at everything that he's done, it's a pretty good and pretty impressive list considering he's been in there for 4 years and he's had to fight everybody all the time. All you have to do is just remember to February when everything was just absolutely rolling and it looked like nobody in the Democratic field. You guys remember those primary debates. Potentially you probably weren't watching because not very many people were watching anyways, but I was, and maybe that's why I'm sick enough to start up a news channel. But it was a field of just absolute trash because everybody just kind of thought that the Democrats were just going to try to phone this one in, and then boom, China virus hits, and then they spend months and months and months of programming the public to think that, you know what, this is going to be the end of the world and that these lockdowns are just going to continue and it's all the orange man's fault. Well, at the end of the day, we kind of seen that nobody can stop the virus, and the only guy who's actually done anything significant to stop the virus was the guy who put in Operation Warp Speed and led to the 2 and very, very soon 3 vaccines to be put out into the world. But again, just, keep telling us how many people that he's killed. We get it. You hate his guts, media. But yeah, that was a long one. We covered a bunch of stuff here today, and I think that's important because, like I said, it's probably going to be the final election video of 2020, and it's been a very important topic on this channel, and you guys have supported the content immensely and amazingly. Honestly, up until about a few days ago, it was far and away the most popular stuff that I've had on my channel. Outside of that one video, well, a couple of videos that went way, way, way bonkers successful. I don't know why. I really don't know why. I got a couple of theories, but nothing that'll really stick. But I don't like to look into the past. Everything, I always try to answer everybody's questions and comments for the first day there, but I would be losing my goddamn mind if I was to go back through 350 fucking videos and make sure that there's no new comments on every single one of them. I don't have that much time. Sorry. But if you guys ever want to get a hold of me, social media handles, I check them not regularly, but at least once a day. And then by all means, I will always try to get to as many comments in the day as I possibly can. I set aside specific amounts of time to make sure that I interact with everybody who is kind enough to leave a comment. And like I said, if you guys have made it this far in the video, you already know that. I really appreciate you all because we'll probably talk about it a couple more times because I got a couple more videos here today, but 2020's been amazing. And I can't believe we're over 200 subscribers on here. I would have been happy with, I don't know, a handful. But it lets me know that my bet I made on myself is going to pay off. And 2021 is going to be great for everybody watching this channel. And before we get too sappy, I will end it there and we'll talk about, probably fucking lockdowns, if not that, in the final video. Because there are hypocrites everywhere and you guys need to know about that, and I like to call them mean names. Anyways, guys, I thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.